Hey everybody, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today here on the channel, we're going to be talking about King Kong. No, not the 1933 classic or the 2005 Peter Jackson film. No, we're going to talk about the forgotten red-headed stepchild of the King Kong franchise, the 1976 remake directed by John Guillermin, starring Jeff Bridges, Jessica Lange in her first role, and the late great Charles Grodin. And this actually happens to be my favorite King Kong film of all time. And we're also going to be talking about its brand new Paramount 4K Blu-ray Steelbook. And before we get into that 4K Steelbook review, I like to give a film review, so if you don't want to know anything about this movie, you can skip ahead to the 4K Blu-ray review right now. But if you do want to stick around, I like to give a quick film review, and that's what I'm going to do. And the reason why that this one is my favorite of the King Kong films is this is the one I grew up with. Despite the fact I was born in 1992, my mother was born in 1970, and she absolutely loved 1976's King Kong. You know, it was part of her childhood. And because she loved this movie so much, when I was a child, we watched this movie a bunch of times, and I just always really enjoyed it. So I have a lot of those childhood nostalgic feelings attached to it, even though you would think in 2005 when Peter Jackson's King Kong came out, you know, this was directed by the guy who just gave us 3 great Lord of the Rings movies. I mean, it had so much hype behind it. It even had an Xbox 360 game, which I have a lot of feelings about as well, but that's a story for another day. I went and saw Peter Jackson's King Kong, and just like a lot of movies, the way the movie looked, it just completely took me out of the movie. It just felt so artificial, just overbearing on CGI and artificial looking backgrounds, and I know a lot of people prefer that one over this movie, and that's because, you know, it was their King Kong movie. But like I was saying, I was attached to the 1976 one directed by John Guillermin, who just had previously directed 1974's The Towering Inferno. And this movie in tone and in looks feels very similar to The Towering Inferno, and I am a big fan of The Towering Inferno. That's a movie that needs a 4K Blu-ray in the worst way, and I really do think that 1970s disaster film feeling really did carry over well into King Kong, especially in the early going of this movie when we're building up that mystery and we do not know exactly what King Kong is. Obviously, you're going into the movie, you know what King Kong is, but it starts off with Jeff Bridges sneaking his way onto an oil company ship. That's another thing about this movie that they changed from the 1933 one, was they were leaning into the big giant oil companies. They even mentioned Exxon and Shell in the early part of this movie. In the 1970s in the United States, there was a big oil shortage. We had a big gas problem here in the United States. You know, you could only get gas on every other day depending on the last digit of your license plates. You had odd days, you had even days, and they wanted to take that aspect and put it into this film. Charles Grodin is actually the captain of this ship. They're actually heading to an island that he discovered through stolen United States satellite pictures. You know, it's always got this fog around it. They have pictures from like about, I don't know, like 50 years ago that had the same fog around it. And he's like, you know what I think's there? I think it's oil. Now, Jeff Bridges, who sneaks his way onto the ship, he's a primate paleontologist, so he obviously cares about primates, and what he believes is something that he heard, that the chanting of Kong, this god Kong, and he wants to go there and see what this is, so he's going to find his way there. They eventually work out a deal, him and Charles Grodin, where he'll be the photographer for this voyage, because Charles Grodin, man, I love Charles Grodin. You know, this is the guy from Midnight Run, Beethoven, Dave. I mean, he is a phenomenal comedic actor, and in this movie, he is overacting his ass off. I mean, you really want to hate this guy. He's just this guy who wants to kiss corporate's ass. He really wants to get his flowers for all the work he's doing, despite the fact that he's basically an asshole and he doesn't know anything that's going on, and he gets proven wrong time and time and time again, and I'm still surprised that people listen to him, despite the fact that Jeff Bridges clearly knows a lot more than him. And when they discover Jessica Lange in her first movie, you know, they find her floating on a raft, and then this love story develops between Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange, and in her first movie, she is fantastic. Originally, they wanted to cast Meryl Streep, but the producer said they didn't think she was pretty enough, which is absolutely insane. You could have had the greatest actress of all time in your film, but you didn't want to do it because the producer said that she wasn't pretty enough. Man, the 1970s, I guess. Jessica Lange, though, is great in this movie, and obviously this was the start of a fantastic acting career. Before this, she was just a model, and she does a really good job in this movie. Honestly, her and Jeff Bridges have a great relationship in this movie, but then it's the relationship between her and Kong, and you really do care about that relationship. And again, I get emotional as we build up towards the very end of this movie. This is the only one that actually uses the World Trade Centers instead of the Empire State Building like they would use in the original one, and then they would use in the 2005 remake. This was using the World Trade Centers in New York City. These had actually just been built. These were considered at the time a huge architecture achievement, so of course they wanted to include them in this movie. And all those scenes, those were real people that they got there that day. They used real extras. So all this stuff, just all shot for real, all shot on location. All that stuff just makes this movie feel more realistic to me, and I think that stuff is something that we just do not have in modern film today. Obviously, the reason why we don't use that is because when it comes to King Kong himself, it does look pretty bad, and that's because they used the mechanical ape in some shots, but for the most part, it's just Rick Baker in a suit. He's the guy in the suit, you know, the great Rick Baker. He's even the one wearing contacts to make his eyes look a little bit more apey, but unfortunately, there are times where I'm watching this movie and it looks like the ape in Trading Places, which we just know is a guy in an ape suit. There's times when you're watching this movie, you go, yeah, that's a guy in an ape suit, but it doesn't completely take you out of it. Like I said, at the very end of this movie, it does end up hitting me emotionally. So even if I do get taken out at some points with that, because yes, it does feel like something straight out of the 1970s, just like a lot of things in this movie, hair, clothes, set design, all that stuff feels like the 1970s, but I don't think that's a bad thing. But I do understand that might be something that works for me and that might not work for other people, and I understand why other people might prefer the 2005 version over this one and prefer the CGI effects, whereas I actually prefer the very cheesy looking effects of this movie, and the dialogue itself is very cheesy, and that was done on purpose. They wanted to make this movie feel a little bit more light and fluffy, wink at the camera, and of course you bring in Charles Grodin, who is a comedian. That's exactly what he's going to go for, and I think all of that works in this film, but I understand that this might not be the King Kong movie for everybody, but this still is, to this very day, my favorite King Kong film. I'm not the world's biggest King Kong film, but gun to my head, what is my favorite King Kong film? It's going to be 1976's King Kong, and if you guys haven't seen this one, maybe you want to check out this 4K Steelbook from Paramount that we're going to talk about right now. Well, here it is, the Paramount 4K Steelbook for 1976's King Kong. And this came out about 2 weeks ago. I didn't get it until just now. And was the wait worth it? Well, unfortunately, this is your classic Paramount mixed bag. First of all, great packaging. This looks like one of those Lionsgate Steelbooks, but Paramount took the design, so when you slide the slipcover off the Steelbook, you know, there's Kong, and then over here we got Jessica Lange. I do love the artwork on this. It does feel a little bit busy, especially on the back, and this all does kind of have like a semi-gloss look to it. It doesn't really look that great, and you know, I don't really complain about these too often, but they are fingerprint magnets. When you come inside, this did come in a digital code. You get one Blu-ray, one 4K Blu-ray. Because it's Paramount, that means that 4K Blu-ray is in black and that Blu-ray is in blue, and those are not the same exact cuts on both of those discs. So the Blu-ray disc is actually going to be the extended TV cut, and that goes over 3 hours long. And if you're someone who's a fan of that TV cut, it is not going to look the same as it did in the past. They actually wanted to make it feel more cinematic. They actually put up a graphic right before the Blu-ray starts saying that, yes, we changed the aspect ratio for this. There are still some audio issues. This is the best we could do, and I can appreciate that. Being upfront and honest, they did want to make it feel more cinematic with that extended TV cut. Now, me personally, I do not like the extended TV cut because really it's just an extended cut of the movie. It doesn't really add too much to the movie. One thing about a good director's cut or a good extended cut is it really helps to build up more character development. That's the biggest thing that you want with a good director's cut. Help develop those characters a little bit more. Whereas this TV cut is just adding longer shots in that are a little bit unnecessary. So I think that the theatrical cut is still the way to go, but the only way you can watch that theatrical cut is on that 4K Blu-ray. So if you're buying this 4K Blu-ray just for the Blu-ray that's packed in here, just know you're getting the theatrical cut, and it definitely does look and sound much worse than that 4K Blu-ray. It has a lot harder time of dealing with the grain, whereas the 4K Blu-ray will definitely make the grain a little bit less noticeable, but of course we want to keep that grain, but it's not an overwhelming amount like at some points in the Blu-ray. The 4K Blu-ray also has Dolby Vision and HDR10. It's going to look a lot sharper, and again, it's just much tighter at 2 hours and 15 minutes. Just know that what you're getting with the Blu-ray is a much lesser version of the film, but if you're a fan of that extended cut, you do have it on Blu-ray. Me personally, I'll always be watching that theatrical cut on 4K. It looks and sounds better. Now, both of these, which is very weird when it comes to the audio, there's a DTS HD Master Audio 5.1 for the theatrical cut. That is your only audio option. And for the Blu-ray, there's a DTS HD 2.0 mono track, and that is your only audio option. You can never change the audio for either of these on the 4K and the Blu-ray. no subtitle options as well, where you can just change them a bunch. I mean, Paramount, I've complimented them in the past with their options when it comes to language options, subtitle options. So what that tells me is that Paramount is just at the mercy of what's already been available to them. They're not trying to add anything new to these releases. It looks like they're really just updating the visuals, and they're not really putting as much effort in as I was hoping they would. This is the thing with Paramount. When they want to, they can give us some of the best 4K Blu-rays out there, but at other points, they can be very lazy, and that is very evident when it comes to the extras. They literally just labeled it extra on the Blu-ray, and you know what that extra is? The theatrical trailer. The exact same theatrical trailer you can watch on YouTube right now if you want to. Don't even put that on the disc. There was absolutely no point other than for you to just have an extra section to make it look like you filled this disc up with more than you actually did. But I do appreciate them giving us both the extended and the theatrical cut. You know, I would have liked them both on separate discs for people out there who like the 4K, who want to watch the extended cut on 4K, or for people who want to watch the theatrical cut on Blu-ray. We could have got the best of both worlds here, but again, that would have cost a lot more money. And this actually wasn't the most expensive 4K Blu-ray. So I can understand cutting the corners a little bit because you didn't overcharge for this one, especially since the packaging is fantastic, and there is a pretty noticeable visual upgrade there when you go from the Blu-ray to the 4K Blu-ray. And this is absolutely by far the best that King Kong has ever looked. Just don't expect to get your socks knocked off with this one. They are definitely at the mercy of the source material with this, and from what I can tell based on watching this, the source material probably not in the best of shape, so I think they did a great job cleaning it up, and they should be commended for it. Just don't go into this thinking, oh my god, I'm going to be blown away by the visuals and the audio, because you're not. And that's another thing with the audio. Was a little bit disappointed by, but overall, I was also very surprised. Great use of bass in this one. It has a great score, which is done by John Barry, who did numerous, I believe 11 James Bond scores, and I believe he was the first one to ever actually put together and record the original James Bond theme. So he's one of the greatest composers of all time, and I absolutely love the score to King Kong. It is by far my favorite aspect of this movie is the score. I could just listen to the score, and I really do think it actually helps for those very emotional moments and building up the emotion of this movie. I mean, it feels very much like a 1970s score, like a lot of this movie. It does feel like a time capsule back to 1976, and me personally, I never consider that a bad thing. It's another reason why I absolutely love this movie. I just wish that the DTS HD 5.1 just made a little bit better use of the channels, but again, this is a movie that's made in 1976, so maybe I'm being a little bit too nitpicky, because there were moments with this mix that I was like, wow, they really did put a lot of effort into it. So the visuals and the audio, I do think that they did a pretty good job. I just think that they were at the mercy of the source material. The extras, they put absolutely no effort in, and the packaging is really, really, really solid. You can only get it in the Steelbook right now, but I do imagine down the line there will be a standard release with a slipcover, but for right now, you can only get the Steelbook. I'm very happy with that Steelbook. Obviously, it's Paramount. I would have liked some individual disc design to go along with it, but these are minor complaints. My biggest complaint is that we got absolutely no extras at all, which for me, being an extras junkie, that is very, very, very disappointing, but I won't hold it too much against this because I know not everybody cares about that, and you do get a good visual and audio upgrade, just not something that's going to knock your socks off. So how would I rate King Kong on 4K Blu-ray from 1976? I would give this 4K Steelbook a pretty solid 7.5 out of 10 for its price. It's not that bad, but I'm very upset about the lack of new extras, and I do feel like that Paramount cut some corners that they didn't necessarily need to cut just to get this out there, which, you know, not a lot of studios are going to be bringing us a movie like 1976's King Kong, and I understand that. This isn't one of the most beloved films from the 1970s, and it's probably not even that beloved of a King Kong movie, but for people like me who absolutely love this movie, and it does bring back nostalgic childhood feelings, I wanted a little bit more effort put into this movie. You know, this is one of those movies I would have liked to send to my mom because I know she's a big fan of this movie, but she doesn't have a 4K Blu-ray player. She has a Blu-ray player, but now she's going to have to watch that extended TV cut, and I know my mother, she's not going to like that. She wants to watch the theatrical cut, so it's a little bit disappointing in that sense, and I know people who just buy the 4K Blu-rays just for the pack-in Blu-ray, they're going to be pretty disappointed as well. So even though I do feel overall that this is worthy of your time, worthy of your hard-earned money, maybe on a sale price, but it really isn't that expensive, I was just slightly disappointed by it, but I'm still pretty happy with my purchase, and of course, I cannot wait to revisit 1976's King Kong. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it here for me on another episode of Let's Talk. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, turn notifications on, share this video if you could, because that really does help the algorithm. And we also have channel memberships. We have a Friends of the Channel tier, we have a Producers tier where you're going to find John Doe Juggalo, Jason Martin, and Mr. Smelly Potato. We have a director's tier where you're going to find Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews. But if you got no extra money to throw our way, don't worry about it. We just appreciate you guys checking out this video. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, don't forget to get out in those streets and tell your friends about us. And then we'll be seeing you around.